I want to give you the floor. Like what is the city that you're talking about?
Well, I've had this interest in agriculture, landscape design, and community building, for a long time now. And in the last couple of years, it came to my attention that there's laws that allow for incorporating a municipality in this country. And those laws are, dependent on the state that you're in. So I just started to think about that a little more critically and imaginatively. And I'm from Ohio. Originally, I grew up in Cincinnati. And there's a ton of affordable, fertile land in Ohio. It's been abused for generations as conventional monocultured agricultural land. A lot of corn, a lot of soy production. And so I've recently been developing this kind of fantastical idea to gather funds and purchase a massive parcel of agricultural land in Ohio in a place with fairly fertile soil, abundant groundwater, and a good degree of climate resilience, based on where it is in the country and what we can even hope to predict at this point in terms of climatic shifts. And the vision would be to start a farm, a diversified, small market garden farm at first, with some other people, with very different skills and passions, and to essentially begin subdividing the land into small lots and create an HOA and try to find the right people that want to purchase these residential lots and start to build structures and residences and eventually businesses on this land. And I don't need to go too deep into like the details of this process or like some of the ideas around the finances of the project, but the basic premise would be to try to create a community of people around the central values of local food, clean water, and community, and participatory community action around decision making and land management. And the hope would be to bring in people with to encourage people to move there that have a variety of skills, and hopefully a lot of people that remember a lot of ancestral wisdom, everything from ancient forestry practices to herbal plant medicine, to carpentry and shoemaking and auto mechanics, all of these different skills that are fundamentally important to our lives. The hope would be that to create a community where all of these people are present and we can have a really strong local economy. And I know this sounds really, really, I don't know, just vague and big. And I suppose that's the picture that I'm painting in this moment. But we live in a time where money pretty much circulates, the vast majority of money circulates from many hands into the hands of a few. We have these like we think about the economy like a watershed, and there's just these massive oceans that are the multinational corporations. That's where the money flows into. Because we don't have a healthy local economy where money can pass between people many times, and money can flow within a community. So part of this idea to create this like city in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, is to hopefully have a community of people that is able to thrive, economically speaking, by selling goods and services to each other. And also by radically changing our understanding of value.
One thing that stands out to me about this project, this even in its infantile state, is there's a lot of scales at which community can exist. We've talked about living in scales from like a few people to 100 people. There are a lot of existing kind of new age community projects scattered around anywhere from, I don't know, in the 10 people to maybe in the hundreds. I think there are few that get bigger than in the hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's probably a lot to learn from all the different scales, but what stands out to me about this project is that the scale seems to be on the very large side. Like, at least
over 1,000 people.
In the vision, like when I think of a city, it's like thousands of people at a certain point, right? Like, at least that's where it would grow into, like when I think of a city. I guess it's different if, maybe that's not the scale you're thinking of.
I don't have like a number, right? I think the hope would be that there'd be enough people, there's enough concentration of people to create a really lively cultural environment and to create the foundation for people to find niches within the local economy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the population needs to be, the whole foundational value of the city is local food and clean water. And so I think it's very important for the population of the city to be in line with the carrying capacity of the agricultural land and the surrounding ecology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the intention would be to be, intensively managing the wildlands around the community and doing a fair share of hunting, doing a fair share of growing food and kind of finding food in a diversity of ways, diversifying the food production. But you can't just grow the population exorbitantly. There needs to be like a reasonable cap there.
Like an attunement to the earth,
mm-hmm.
in terms of how many people can live sustainably in a place. And 1,000 people is a lot of people. I mean, I know Sterling College said that they kept their numbers to around 120 or so, 130, because there was some, I'm forgetting the exact reference now, but there was some researcher who wrote a paper saying that that was the number of people who anyone could really know intimately in their life, and that was like the ideal size for communities to be,
right.
And
I think it's more exciting to have. I like what you get with a bigger community. I think it's more exciting and dynamic to have. You're never going to have complete anonymity in a city of like 1,000 to 5,000 people, but there's a lot of unknown there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important to have a level of unknown. I mean, there's always a level of unknown. There's being alive. There's an ample amount of mystery. But to think of a community that's like large enough to have like communities nested in it and communities nested in those communities, and sort of like a city, right? Like that's when we get to the scale of a city, or even like a town, a sizable town. There's like there's sort of fractals and clusters of different communities, and there's overlap. There's different activities that bring different groups of people together. And I thought I'm right now reading The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow, and they mentioned that article or that paper that about the community size thing, and they were kind of challenging it. They were like they were saying like, no, we think a lot of people throughout a lot of human history have known a lot more people than 120 in their lives.
Like known them well.
Yeah. And personally, I also I like living in places where there's like, I also tend to live in the woods, but I also like living in places where I'm nearby to like different kinds of people, and it usually takes like a bigger population center for there to be different kinds of people, and also the types of activities that I want to be taking a part in. It feels kind of weird if I'm like living in a small community that has where I have all my needs met. There's something actually sort of strange about that in like, it sounds idyllic, but then I think the level of like uniformity culturally in that type of setting, it's like, because I'm really into contact improv dance, and even just to have a community, a large enough community of contact improv dancers in a like sort of naturally in an area. There aren't a lot of places with 100 people living there that have a sufficient supply of contact improv dancers. It usually takes a bigger population center for that sort of community to pop up, because it's kind of niche. So I don't want to live in such a homogenous place where, where there's 100 people and everyone is a contact improv dancer. Like that sounds cool for like a period of time, but then ultimately, like, it's really great to have cultural, and like each one of those people is still like an interesting dynamic being with other things going on in their life. But like it also is great when there's like where there's a big enough community that there's like different things happening, and there can be cross-pollination between all sorts of different people. I think that's and
because when we're around different kinds of people with different ideologies and skills, we end up doing things we could never have guessed. We pick up a new hobby that we never thought we ever wanted to do, or an idea that we always thought was like questionable or even outright wrong. We start to consider it more and think, oh, maybe it's not so wrong. Maybe there's truth in that, to that other perspective. So I think those experiences are good. And especially just for the sake of skill sharing, I think it's important to have a lot of people with very different skills to be able to teach each other how to do things, and especially to teach children how to do things.
I get really curious about, what is the number of, like, when you talk about local economic systems, how, like, what is the number of people, and what are the economic structures need to be like in order to create this sort of self-sustaining, healthy flow of goods and services and money.
Right.
Yeah, that's an area of curiosity.
Totally. Yeah, it is fascinating. It's like, my short answer is I don't know.
And knowledge, of course. Knowledge is yeah.
But if you're a cobbler, you fix shoes. It's like,
how many people how many people can one cobbler satisfy?
Yeah, and also, like, you live in a population of 1,000 people. How often are people coming to you to get their shoes repaired? In that pool of 1,000 people,
Totally, yeah, because there needs to be enough business for a cobbler to be able to be a cobbler.
Mm-hmm.
And there also needs to be not so much more business that we need like another cobbler. But I guess going from 0 to 1 is the hard thing, because once we have one cobbler, they could hopefully teach another cobbler.
Yeah, ideally.
Have like a part-time assistant or something.
Ideally. But it's just sort of like, you're still like, it's like, yeah, we're still working within this like framework of capitalism where we need money to be able to purchase goods and services from the quote unquote outside world, and we need money to pay taxes to the federal and state governments. But what happens when we need money for very little else? What happens when we are able to access abundance of different foods and products from within the community?
And how does that come about? How do, I guess what comes to mind is like something Charles Eisenstein writes about in Sacred Economics, like deflationary economics, right? Like,
right. Yeah, we've talked about this before.
How, because if we even within a community we could create a deflationary economic trend, even if the outside world around us is still on an inflationary trend.
Mm-hmm.
Is that possible? And like, how would that work? Because it could hypothetically lead to things being very inexpensive, like, or maybe money not even being necessary within the community.
Right, there's an exchange happening.
It could be a gradual progression to get there.
There's an exchange happening, but maybe it's not conditional on the U.S. dollar in the same sense that your other purchases are conditional on the U.S. dollar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, just what happens in general when we strip down the human experience to getting the resources that we need to survive, and then putting the rest of our energy towards play and imagination. What happens then,
Yeah, that reminds me of this project that I heard about this year. Someone in the Hudson Valley who does this annual gathering where it's basically like, that's the premise for it. It's basically like, it's all actually funded by some like wealthy people who want to just support them, and they have a whole week where anyone can come and it's free and there's food and you just and it's basically like, we just have time to create and to play and to share, and as community, what do we want to do?
Yeah.
Sort of this post-capitalistic experiment.
Yeah. And it's really fascinating because I feel like a lot of the most enduring intentional communities that I've come across are started by wealthier, older folks, men and women who have a lot of money and have great ideas and ideals. Because they can basically become the benefactors of like play and exploration. And the money doesn't run out. Nobody's concerned about health, well, I don't know. Health insurance might be a different story, but the money doesn't run out. I'm curious about what I'm curious about is like how to give this project a philanthropic bent and structure some kind of a nonprofit for collecting, funds toward the farm as an educational and experimental farm, and also toward, this mission of developing a different kind of a city, while not relying entirely on benevolent donations. Trying to create a healthy ecosystem.
One angle is like making it like a fully subsidized town experiment, right? Where you survive on donations because it's like a nonprofit. They're doing educational work. It's experimental community living.
Right. People are doing installations and art and et cetera, et cetera.
And that's awesome. But I guess what's really juicy about the experiment is like, that's really cool. But then like what's really juicy about it is like, can we actually take baby steps as a to be able to stand on our own, right, as like a community.
Yeah.
And maybe there would be like a transitionary period from being more subsidized to being self-sustaining economically.
And just playing with like, what kind of a reality can we create where school teachers, mechanics, electricians, professors like want to put themselves in a place like this, because it's such an exciting opportunity to create, in a different way, while having their needs met, on a fundamental level. Like what kind of a reality does that have to? What kind of reality is that?
Yeah. What does that have to feel like? What does that have to be like? To be there, to live there.
Yeah, I mean, the other option is like, right, we do this somewhere near a metropolitan area, and it's a commuter town, and people just go into the nearest metro area to work, and then they come back at night. And I think practically that makes a lot of sense, but I don't think it's as exciting. I think to be in relative proximity to a metro area for the sake of like hospitals and occasional like, runs to like big box stores for various things, it makes a lot of sense. But the hope would be that I even now, I mean, there's communities all over the world right now for people in the tech space, digital nomads who live together in these intentional communities, some of which have like an agricultural leaning. But to me, that's not as exciting either. I mean, I think it's cool. But if everyone's just like remote, working remote, whether it's creative work or just being a middleman, it's like, once again, I just think there's a fundamental lack there of contributing directly toward the well-being of your community and working to develop and manage the land that's around you.
Yeah.
And if these remote work positions are 40 plus hours a week, that's a lot of time you're not spending contributing to your community. I guess that you are the only, the positive note is that you make an income which you can spend in your community. You can share resources in that way. But
could create a very high local tax for people earning over a certain amount of money. It's like disincentivize people from doing that, being like, well, if you want to do that, 50% tax, but you'll still be like making way more money than everyone else. So you'll be the richest person in your community still. And I mean, the subsidized, like creating some sort of like endowment or, / combination with getting funding from philanthropists or investors, such that an experiment like this could happen, and maybe such that certain people on an ongoing basis could be funded to live there and create art or whatever it is that they're doing, would make sense to me. It's like it's pretty attractive, I think, as a premise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can find a way to make this an affordable place for artists,
Mm-hmm.
and farmers who historically don't have a lot of money, then that's a big win.
Yeah. I mean, the government historically provides subsidies for farmers and provides grants for farmers and artists. The government's being pretty bad at funding the arts these days in the U.S., but in other countries, a lot of artists get supported by grant funding.
It's true.
Universities fund artists. So it's sort of as well as like throughout history, a lot of very famous artists and scientists, thinkers have been funded by wealthy people who just want to support their work.
Yep. Totally.
So it's like a very trodden path, I suppose, the one of like as a society, as communities, sort of figuring out how to fund work that doesn't directly result in goods and services that are like valued economically, but we agree and sort of recognize individually or collectively that it's valuable that this is happening and that these people are here getting to do whatever the fuck they want.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also worth mentioning, this is like, I don't know what you just said that just kind of pushed me in this direction, but a big motivator behind this whole idea of the city has also been some of the forecast around like how AI will likely impact the modern economy and human values, right? Because in all likelihood AI is going to change the economy completely and make a lot of people redundant, and a lot of people are going to lose their value in the workplace. And people are going to have, I think, an even bigger existential crisis than we have right now about what we should do with our lives and what we should do with our energy, what we should do with our hands and our bodies.
And so there's a reclamation of purpose, sort of.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. Yeah, a reclamation of purpose. Yeah. Finding meaning in doing things in a place with other people, creating things together, finding a life that is more, or finding a way of life where there's meaning other than just buying shit, selling shit, advertising shit. You know, rediscovering life beyond consumerism. And really just, honing, just like a deeper presence in general. We just see so many people becoming less and less present. And it's a struggle for me in my own life to be present and engaged in the sensual dance of life, and all of its beauty and hardship.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, whether it's through this concept of this terrestrial paradise city in Ohio or it's through some other project, I want to be part of the wave of people pushing for greater presence, as a human community.
It's beautiful. And yeah, I'm right there with you.